He was handcuffed in broad daylight for looking suspicious, yet the officers had no clue they had just arrested a black man who was a judge. By the very next day, he would preside over their case, exposing a system that had failed everyone involved. What happened next? It'll leave everyone shocked. But let's rewind and start from the beginning. In the lively downtown area of Silver Springs, Officer Bradley and Officer Carter patrolled the bustling streets, their presence exuding an air of dominance, something they were known for. Their reputation for targeting individuals they found suspicious was no secret among locals. Many whispered about their actions, but few dared to confront them. That day, their attention locked on a man they decided didn't belong. Martin Green, a middle-aged black man with quiet authority, stepped out of a sleek black sedan parked near City Hall. His crisp navy suit, complete with a pocket square and polished leather shoes, spoke volumes about his professionalism. In his hand, he carried a well-worn leather briefcase, evidence of years of dedicated work. Martin's every movement exuded confidence, his calm stride a reflection of a man on a purposeful mission. To Bradley and Carter, though, his composed demeanor wasn't a sign of respectability, it was a red flag. "Sir, stop right there," Bradley barked, his hand instinctively hovering near his holstered weapon. His tone carried an air of presumed authority, sharpened by an undeniable prejudice. Martin stopped mid-stride, turning slowly with disbelief flickering in his eyes. His composed expression barely wavered as he spoke. "Officers, is there a problem?" His voice remained steady, calm, and utterly devoid of panic, a response that clearly unsettled them. "We've had reports of a vehicle like yours involved in a nearby theft," Carter added, his tone dripping with feigned concern. The accusation? Baseless, plucked straight out of thin air. But Martin's unshaken demeanor only seemed to provoke them further. Martin raised an eyebrow, his voice unwavering. "That's a serious accusation. May I see the report?" Irritation flashed across Bradley's face. "Hands where I can see them. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice," he snapped, escalating the situation without any real cause. Passers-by froze, their faces a mix of shock and unease. Phones quickly emerged, recording every second of the scene. Martin complied without resistance, his movements deliberate. As the cold metal of the cuffs snapped around his wrists, he looked directly at the officers. "You're making a grave mistake," he said quietly but firmly. The officers laughed mockingly, oblivious to the storm they had just unleashed. Inside the precinct, Martin Green sat composed in a holding cell, a stark contrast to the chaotic, hostile environment around him. Bradley and Carter, bolstered by the false sense of power their badges gave them, mocked him relentlessly. "Think he's some kind of big shot?" Bradley sneered. "Bet he thinks staying quiet makes him look innocent," Carter added with a smirk. Martin's silence remained unbroken, his calm demeanor only deepening their unease. Every time he politely requested a phone call, he was met with outright dismissal. Instead, the officers focused on hours of baseless questioning, their goal more about control than truth. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, a very different story was taking shape. Videos of Martin's arrest, captured by bystanders, began spreading rapidly on social media. The clips revealed everything: the fabricated accusations, the aggressive handling, and Martin's composed compliance. Outrage erupted online. Activists and community leaders called out the blatant racial profiling. News anchors debated the footage, questioning the officers' motives, while hashtags demanding justice trended nationwide. Unaware of the firestorm building outside, Bradley and Carter continued reveling in their supposed triumph. To them, Martin was just another number to pad their arrest stats. The thought that they'd detained someone important? It never even crossed their minds. In his cell, Martin finally broke his silence. He addressed the sergeant on duty with quiet authority. "I need to contact my office. I have court tomorrow." The sergeant smirked, leaning casually against his desk. "Court? You planning to defend yourself in front of a judge?" Martin's gaze was steady as he replied, "No, I am the judge." The room fell silent. The sergeant's smirk disappeared as he quickly checked the database. His face paled when the truth appeared. Martin Green, Justice of the Peace, presiding judge at Silver Springs Municipal Court. Panic spread like wildfire through the precinct as the gravity of their mistake hit. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Journalists jostled for space, their cameras trained on the entrance. The gallery was packed with community members, many of whom had seen Martin's unjust arrest online. Their faces reflected both outrage and curiosity. When Martin Green entered the courtroom in his judicial robe, the room fell silent. Walking with measured confidence, his presence commanded respect. No longer the man in handcuffs, Martin now presided as the judge. His gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on the two officers who had humiliated him. Bradley and Carter entered moments later, their usual bravado replaced by visible discomfort. Their faces were pale, their eyes darting nervously, avoiding the crowd's judgmental stares and the piercing gaze of Martin Green. Officers Bradley and Carter, Martin's voice rang out, firm and resolute. You stand accused of racial profiling, unlawful arrest, and abuse of power. Do you have anything to say in your defense? The officers fumbled for words, their responses disjointed and unconvincing. They desperately tried to justify their actions, claiming they were merely following protocol and acting on a report. But their weak excuses crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The courtroom reviewed the viral videos that captured the arrest, clearly showing Martin's composed and dignified demeanor against the officers' aggressive conduct. Witness testimonies painted a damning picture of fabricated accusations and excessive force. And then there was Martin's impeccable reputation, a justice of the peace with a long record of dedicated service to the community. As Martin presided over the proceedings, his professionalism never wavered. Yet, the fire in his eyes betrayed a deeper resolve, a determination to confront the injustice head-on. The irony of the situation was impossible to ignore. The officers had arrested a man who was on his way to meet the mayor to discuss community reforms, only to become the very embodiment of the systemic failures he sought to address. By the session's end, the truth had fully unraveled. The officers' narrative had been exposed for what it was, a fabrication. Bradley and Carter stood stripped of their credibility, their actions laid bare before the court and the public. The verdict came swiftly, delivering a powerful message. Officers Bradley and Carter were suspended without pay, pending further investigation. Their reckless actions and blatant racial profiling were no longer just internal matters. They had ignited public outrage. The police chief, visibly strained under the weight of the scandal, issued a public apology. He admitted that the department hadn't just failed Martin Green, it had failed the entire community. However, no amount of remorse could undo the damage. The department's reputation was now tarnished, a symbol of systemic racism in the eyes of many. For Martin, this ordeal marked a turning point, not just personally, but for the community he had faithfully served. Rather than succumbing to bitterness, he channeled his experience into action. Using his judicial platform and newfound public support, Martin spearheaded an ambitious initiative to reform the local police force. He collaborated tirelessly with city officials, developing mandatory training programs designed to dismantle racial bias, foster community engagement, and rebuild trust between law enforcement and the citizens they were meant to protect. The story of Martin Green, a respected judge wrongfully arrested by the very system he represented, galvanized the community. Protests demanding accountability spread across Silver Springs, uniting people from all races and backgrounds. Together, they stood in solidarity, demanding justice. The ripple effects of the incident were profound. Statewide reforms were introduced, including stricter accountability measures for officers and the establishment of independent oversight committees to investigate misconduct. Months later, as the dust began to settle, Martin stood on the steps of City Hall, taking in a rare moment of quiet reflection. Below him, a group of diverse police recruits, selected under the new reforms, filed into the academy. Their faces reflected determination and hope, a glimpse of a future where law enforcement might finally embody equity and respect. A faint smile crossed Martin's face as he watched them. Though the scars of injustice lingered, he allowed himself a sliver of optimism. Change was slow, but it was happening. One day, he believed, justice wouldn't have to be fought for. It would be a given, a foundation upon which society stood firm, unwavering, and fair. For now, Martin remained steadfast in his mission. The fight was far from over, but every step forward was worth it.